Before we begin, two messages. When my company needed to develop a key mobile product, one that I was counting on as a new source of revenue, I knew exactly who to turn to. Macadamian. They delivered on time with incredible attention to detail, and I was able to get product into customers' hands faster than I ever thought possible. I've personally known them for 10 years, and they do make great products even better. Check them out at www.macadamian.com. What mobile platform do companies like eBay, NBC Universal, the Los Angeles Times, Razorfish, and PayPal use to build their cross-platform native applications? Titanium by Appcelerator. They aren't alone. There are now over 25,000 apps deployed by Appcelerator, which has been called the Rosetta Stone of app development. And you can start now for free. Just go to www.appcelerator.com for more information. Hello everybody! Welcome to Untether.tv. This is that place you come to for these in-depth interviews with mobile rock stars. This is another great episode. We are live from, I'm in Ottawa, and I've got René from Austin, and René is a co-founder of a company called Foreca.st. And I'm going to talk just very briefly before I bring René in just about the concept of Foreca.st. We all know about check-in software like Foursquare. We all know about check-in software. Well, it used to be like Koala or Facebook was in there, but there's a massive glut of these companies, and I'm always looking for innovative companies that are thinking differently about location and the use of location. And we started to see a little bit of a trend about a pre-check-in, or I like this as like cognitive check-in. It's like the place where I'm going to be. And while it can't be predicted yet, I'm pretty sure that we're not far away from that down the road when you know all of this stuff comes together. But I'm really interested in the concept of pre-check-in, and not just because of a vanity thing, which is me checking in and letting you know where I am, but also about the business opportunity around the pre-check-in for those companies that you're pre-checking into. So we're going to talk a bunch about these things. We're going to understand what Foreca.st is. We're going to understand why René got into this business and what he's seeing and what his users are seeing in using Foreca.st on a day-to-day basis. So without further ado, René, man, thank you so much for coming on and doing this, spending some time with Untether.
Thank you for having me, Rob. I appreciate it.
Wow, the pleasure's all mine. I hope I painted a decent picture of what Foreca.st is. It's what Foreca.st is to me. But maybe you can give us a little bit more of an in-depth understanding of what Foreca.st is now.
Foreca.st is a very, very simple idea. So instead of telling your friends where you are now with a check-in, you create a forecast to tell your friends where you're going later. And that's it. That's pretty much all the app does.
That's it.
Now, yeah, it might seem like a trivial difference to go from present tense to future tense, but it's not. It's actually a huge difference. And there's two big reasons. One is a social reason, and the other is a business reason. So on the social side, if you think about how check-ins work, there's sort of this myth of the serendipitous connection. The idea that I'm going to check in somewhere, and then a nearby friend is going to see that check-in and then decide to join me. But in practice, that doesn't happen hardly ever. And the reason is you have to have a friend that's nearby and available. And even if you have a friend that's nearby and available, they have no way of knowing if you checked in when you got there or on your way out the door.
Or if you're with somebody.
Or if you're with somebody, right, absolutely. So, all those factors add up to you having a lot of missed opportunities. So with Foreca.st, we solve a lot of those problems. Your friend doesn't have to be nearby anymore because you're giving them enough time to hop in a car. And the more lead time you give your friend, the easier it is for them to free up their schedule. So, if I ask you what you're doing right now, you're probably doing something. You're interviewing me, right? But if I ask you what you're doing in a couple hours, if it's interesting, you can probably free up your schedule. And finally, because our users know when their friends are going to arrive, you say, I'm going to go to dinner at 7, you don't have to worry about missing them as much. So, and all that, yeah.
I mean, and all that is on the user side. What about the business side? You said...
Right, so the business side is super interesting. The holy grail in marketing has always been to understand potential customers' intent, and then to serve ads or marketing to those potential customers based on that insight, so that it's more relevant, and that the likelihood of completing a transaction is greater. So with Foreca.st, what we've built is a system that can discern that intent because our users are actually expressing it directly. And all that means that we're catching people at this really unique moment in the buying cycle. They haven't entirely made up their mind yet about where they're going to go and what they're going to buy when they get there, which means that Forecast is powerfully positioned to influence that decision-making process. So you can imagine this playing out in a bunch of different ways. So imagine you're making a forecast to go to dinner. So we can serve you an ad or a deal for a different restaurant.
Yeah.
Or maybe you've already decided, I'm definitely going to Enoteca tonight. No way I'm not. We can suggest a complementary activity. So maybe drinks beforehand or a movie afterwards.
Right.
And that's sort of some really obvious use cases. Another really interesting use case is, let's say you're forecasting you're going to any kind of retail store. Walmart, the grocery store. There's hundreds of brands that are represented by these retail stores that would love to serve you a coupon, to help you decide to buy a Coke instead of Pepsi.
But that's what's so great about this industry in general is that we could probably sit here for an entire hour and just bounce ideas back and forth about the potential for using location and I call it precognition or precognitive check-ins, but it's all of a sudden, it opens up the potential for these brands. And I always wonder, are they listening? Do they get it? Do they understand? In your conversations, not with industry people, but with actual brands or actual users, do you think that they understand this intuitively? Or are they looking at you like, you're out of your mind?
So it all depends on who you're talking to. Big brands are a hell of a lot more savvy than local businesses, right?
Right.
And in the business models I just pitched, you could see it working from anything from a mom and pop coffee shop up to a mega store like Walmart. You can see plays that small to large businesses could make. And similarly, in that spectrum, you're going to get people that are entirely not savvy to people that are very, very savvy. And so when you're talking about local businesses, because to give a little history about our company, we did another app for almost a year called Hurricane Party. And it's solving a similar type of problem, but the app was just too complicated. It had too much going on, and it didn't really catch that daily usage that we wanted for our users. But we did learn a couple of things from Hurricane Party, and one of them was that we tried to sell to local businesses a lot. And we learned a whole lot about local businesses. And the main thing that we discovered is that they might be savvy, they might not be, but the main thing is that they're time constrained. They need things to be incredibly simple. And all they really care about is, can I get a new person to come in my door?
Right.
If there's a system where you can reliably draw traffic to their business that doesn't require a whole lot of time from them, they'll love it. And if it's anything that's a little ambiguous about whether or not it's bringing people in, it gets more complicated. And that's one of the exciting things about our system is that you can track that whole process between delivering an ad or a deal and actually seeing whether or not it results in them showing up. And not only that, but we can go a step further and say whether or not me serving Rob an ad results in you coming to my local business, but whether or not once you show up, you bring your friends. We think of it as sort of like a real-world clout.
Yep.
Clout's trying to measure your online influence. We're able to measure your real-world influence because maybe you're a popular guy. When you make a forecast, your friends actually join you. When I make a forecast to go to lunch, nobody shows up because I'm a loser.
I often eat alone.
Yeah, I often eat alone. And that becomes really interesting because from a marketing perspective, you're more of a valuable customer, right? You're an influencer in your community because we've tracked how many folks actually change their behavior and decide to join you. So that sort of points towards some really interesting things you can do with differentiated deals. It's more important for me to get you to come to my local business, so I'm going to incentivize you more aggressively than I'd incentivize someone who maybe has a lower real-world clout score.
You're blowing my mind, René, because I got to know and we're a little off track here, but this is a good path to go down so soon. Maybe not this soon, but I'm going to go down it. When you're thinking of this technology, I'm going to take a step back here, set the stage a little bit. Why did you choose the pre-check-in or the early check-in, or why did you choose this business line? What were you seeing that made you decide to say, listen, it's not about now, it's about where I'm going to go? Was it too crowded in that space, or was this? I'm getting to a point here, but how did you decide to be in this business?
There's two things that attracted me. One is there, I think of social networking as sort of there's been a progression, right? When social networking, the dawn of social networking, like 10 years ago, it was mostly past tense. It was mostly, these are the people I know. Here's some photos of stuff we did. But most everything about it was stuff that happened already. And then social networking moved into the present tense with Twitter and Foursquare, and they're primarily concerned with, this is what I'm doing right now. And so it just seemed like a natural progression to move towards this future tense social networking space. And the exciting thing with that is, it's so funny that you call social networking social, because in so many instances it's really antisocial, right? You're not meeting people in the real world, and I saw that as a big opportunity, purely from a user engagement standpoint. Is there needs to be some app that can really help you take those everyday boring things that you do and make them social, right? Like, I mean, we all have to go to like the laundromat or go buy groceries or go eat lunch every single day, and those activities are so much more fun when you can have a friend to join you. It's remarkable how much time I spend not around the people I really care. I spend a huge portion of my day, doing stuff by myself, and I'd much rather be doing it with my friends. So that's sort of the social side. The reason I thought that was an interesting opportunity. The business side is just that it's infinitely more actionable when you're dealing with the future. It hasn't happened yet.
Exactly.
You can influence it, right?
You can. Yes.
Yeah, like all these things that are, these listening tools, they're helpful for identifying a potential customer, but they don't have a whole lot to do with whether or not that customer is in the right frame of mind to do that purchase, right? But since we're moving that time horizon out into the future, it becomes, infinitely more possible to bias those decisions that they're making about where they're going and what they're going to buy, because you're catching them at that moment where they're actually formulating that decision.
It's funny. You don't have to jump in the DeLorean and go back and change their minds, right? And this leads really well into the where I was trying to get to, which was when you attacked this problem, when you looked out and you surveyed the landscape and you said, "This is what interests me," right? It's the idea of influencing a decision and creating, basically bridging the gap between the online social sphere and your real life social sphere, right? It's funny that a bunch of computer people talk about social to begin with. It's very funny that way. And then we hang out in Google Plus, right? It doesn't. And then they put a video in. It's like, oh my God, I can see somebody. There is that thing like what you're talking about. So you obviously surveyed this. You said there's an opportunity somewhere here. So I mean, when you looked at it, were you looking at it from a marketing challenge or a technology challenge first? I mean, what was it that you thought? Listen. This is a marketing challenge. We're going to throw technology at it, or is it like what you did with so many other companies that I've talked to, where it's like, "Hey, this is cool tech. Let's go find a market."
Unfortunately, I think it was the second one to begin with.
Okay.
We've been at this for about 15 months now. We started the company in May of 2010.
Yeah.
And like I said, we spent the first part of it doing this entire different app, and that app was hugely. I say wasteful, but I actually think it was a really valuable experience because we learned a whole lot. But it was wasteful in terms of how we did development. We'd say, this is a neat idea, let's go build it. And we'd do very, very little validation about whether or not it was solving a problem people cared about. So like on an intuitive gut level, I was like, yes, this is like an area that needs innovation. And now that mobile phones are becoming ubiquitous, like, I mean, basically I had this idea not too far after iPhones first hit in 2007. This was something I've been thinking about for a really long time. But when we actually started doing development, it was, we weren't incorporating users into every step of the development process. So when we acknowledged defeat right after South by in 2011, we decided, okay, we need to not just like talk the talk in terms of lean, but we need to actually walk the walk. And Ash Mariah is a local fella in Austin who's written a book called Running Lean.
Yep.
And he worked with us, and my co-founder Eric really became like the czar of lean and whipped us into shape so that we spent, before we wrote a single line of code for Forecast, we interviewed about 50 people who were potential users and made sure that we were actually solving a problem that people cared about. And then once we validated, yes, this is a problem that they care about, we'd come up with like pencil sketches and then wireframes and bring them and make sure that each step was validated all the way through eventually releasing it in July, and we still do that. And every new feature we put through this same rigorous process to make sure that it's something that people, that it's a must-have feature that they absolutely have to have, because we don't want it to be this, we want every single feature in the app to be reinforcing our mission statement, which is to help you connect with your real friends out in the real world, to be social networking that's actually social. That didn't answer your question at all. I got off on a tangent there.
No, it's okay, because you brought up Hurricane Party again, and I'm really intrigued by this because did you put that product down? Like, does it exist still today?
It does exist, and I hope it finds a home. It's I think it's a well-designed and I think the craftsmanship of the app is very high. But it didn't work outside of that hyper-social context of South by. I mean, South by was a big hit. People used it a lot. There's a lot of downloads. We were voted the hottest startup in Tech Cocktail. We got a lot of great press. Yeah. But outside of that, people, they were only using it to create parties. Like, come to my house on Saturday. It's going to be a big party. And people don't throw big parties very often. It wasn't something that you used every day.
And that's a pretty valuable lesson to learn, obviously, because I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs who are building mobile companies, obviously, and building product, and that's the thing that I mean everybody struggles with it is that in order to get a mobile application into your daily life, it has to be something that you'd want to use daily, and a lot of companies that I talk to, it's like a car buying app, right? Like, how often do you download and use that? Not often. Right? Once every 8 years, according to North American standards. That's when humans buy cars, every 8 years. Pretty useless implementation of an app if you're only going to use it once every 8 years. So, but how did you, with all the media, so you're covered everywhere, right? You're rated a top app or a top startup, and it must have been kind of a comeuppance to kind of come back from that and just say, like, geez, we got to kill this thing. There's no market for this. What was that like?
It was really funny because I was funny. I'm the CEO, and it was funny. Well, funny in kind of a cruel way. But I went to right after South by. I flew down to the Bay Area because we're going to raise our a round of financing to keep the good ship Hurricane Party afloat. Yep. And I come back, and Eric or Richard. We're like, hey, we've been kicking around this idea in the office for this other thing called Forecast, and I was like, yeah, good joke.
Nice.
Because I was just out there, telling everyone why Hurricane Party was the best thing since sliced bread, and then they told me the idea, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool, but guys, come on, we spent 10 months building this thing, are you kidding? And little by little, we sort of all kind of, we're interested enough into it. I was like, well, let's do an experiment. So this is a fun story. One of the big things with lean is that you want to minimize waste as much as possible. So that means trying to validate things without spending a whole lot of time coding anything. So we used a Beluga a whole lot in the office. So we're like, well, let's make a Beluga with just our company and a friend's company. And all we're going to do in the Beluga is say where we're going later. That's the only thing you can do. You can't write any other kind of group text message, chat, or whatever. You just say, I'm going to go there at the place you're going and the time you're going to get there. And let's just see if it's interesting or fun to do. And we did it for about a week, and it became apparent really early on that it was actually really fun and really useful to know where your close friends were going to be later. And after that, we were all sort of won over. We're like, well, okay, this took us exactly 5 minutes to create, and it was a whole lot of fun, and generally a whole lot more fun than we've ever had with Hurricane Party. So let's
nice.
Let's go for it full tilt. And we were redlined in terms of like where we were with money. We'd raised about $100,000 on the other side of the early stage accelerator that we went through, Capital Factory. Mm-hmm. And we knew we had burn rate for another 2, maybe 3 months, and we're like, that's about how long it's going to take us to build this thing. Let's do it.
Heads down and go.
Yeah, heads down and go. And then once we released it in July, we gave it to 80 of our close friends, and it's just mushroomed from there into about 33,000 users over the last 2 months, which was enough social proof for us to say this is really worth our time to continue.
I'm going to come back to the usage because I'm really interested about this concept because I've interviewed a bunch of people who are companies who are building social chat and social discussion, location-based social discussion applications, and it dawns on me that people build for a launch, right? They build for a release. And do you think that what you guys did with Hurricane Party was build for South by Southwest? Like, did you think, okay, we're going to launch there, so we got to build something that's going to generate a lot of interest there, but kind of nothing beyond that? Or do you think that influenced you? Influenced the product?
Definitely influenced the product. It was November of 2010. We're like, okay, South by is going to be the big thing. You know, we raised a little bit of money. We hired a fantastic PR firm to help us with the launch. You know, our minds were we had a countdown on the wall. It was, 69 days till South by, 50 days till South by, and everything was geared towards that. And what that did was it was, well, it was putting all of our eggs in one basket. It was, we had, very little validation that anyone was going to want to use the app before we actually launched it at South by. So I would suggest anyone who's thinking about launching an app, don't spend any money on PR and marketing, even though we learned a whole lot and we love our PR firm. Don't spend any money until you've proven that a substantial number of people are using the app. Make sure you have that product market fit before you go spend $50,000 on launching an app. It just doesn't make any sense. It's a very expensive, wasteful way to figure out if an app works or not. I mean, if it's a good app, then fantastic. But it's a very risky way to go about it.
It's kind of like postpartum, right? Like at the end of it, you guys succeeded beyond a shadow of a doubt. You succeeded in your goal at South by Southwest, right? Like you were there, and you're like, guys, we did this, right? It's that great feeling, right? But then you get back to the office, and it's like, but I'm still empty, right? Or we did it. Now what? And and then it's the shiny truck syndrome, right? Or squirrel, forecast. But it is such an important lesson here is that, I saw a lot of companies driving towards South by Southwest, launching at South by Southwest, and then I haven't heard from them since. And that's a big, it's upsetting because you're not building in isolation. You've got to build something, like you said, that people will actually want to use over and over and over again.
Absolutely.
So, but you said you've now got 33,000 users. And you're still, I guess, classified in beta. But what are you seeing with these users? Frequency, all of this kind of stuff. Because I'm really interested about, it's one thing to get somebody to use the software, but the data you get back from there is as valuable or even more valuable for businesses. So, I mean, is there anything that strikes you as odd? Are people using it every day?
Yeah. So, our usage numbers go up and down depending on the day or the week. But on average, since we've launched, our engagement has been pretty high. Mm-hmm. On average, we're about at 10% for daily usage. And on average, we're at about 40% for weekly usage. Okay. I mean, since we've only been out for a couple of months, it doesn't make sense to do monthly usage. That number is artificially high. It's at 75%. But that's
good
because
number, though. That goes on your investment deck, right? 75% monthly usage. That's great.
But yeah, I mean, I think we have really hit that, or proven that that the app we have right now, which is totally non-optimized, it's still very much in beta. There's a whole lot of really obvious stuff that we need to go build for it. But it's proven that even in its mediocre, maybe B+ state that it's in right now, that folks are interested enough in this concept that they're using it on in a pretty substantial daily way.
And I mean, I just want to finish off with Hurricane because I forgot one question, which was. When you went to San Francisco and talked to the investors, was there interest for that app?
There was, and I think what I've learned for anyone who's trying to raise money, and anyone who's done it a couple times, I'm sure knows this. There's really three things that you need if you're going to raise money, and if you have one of them, you can probably raise money. If you got more than one, you're great. If you don't have any, you have to have a rich uncle. One is you have to have a track record. If you have a track record, you can raise money, no problem, meaning that you've sold a company for an okay exit. Yep. The other thing is you can make a user play, and that's what we're trying to do right now, which is say, look, it's social proof. People are using the app. You should invest. And the last one is revenue. If you've got revenue, people will generally invest. We didn't have any of that with Hurricane Party, so it was incredibly difficult to raise money. And the only thing that you're sort of left with is this is a neat space, and our team is good. We've got a good team, which sort of goes under that track record thing, but not really. Yeah. And you can find some angel investors that are willing to go out on a limb and say, yes, I believe in this team. They've managed to stay together for a year without killing each other or falling apart. They can look at stuff like that and say, yeah, I'll make a small bet, $25K, $50K bet. But when you're looking to raise a couple million, you really need one of those three things. So it was incredibly hard with Hurricane Party, and though we had some interest from people, it was clear that it wasn't going to happen, which is another reason that swallowing that bitter pill of switching to Forecast was a lot easier to do.
Well, and which is what's so great about the mobile industry is that you can change like that so quickly. So I mean, you said within 2 to 3 months, you were done with Hurricane Party and had launched to 8 of your friends, a beta of Forecast, right?
Yeah, it was a pretty fast transition. I mean, and I really owe that to the experience we got with Hurricane Party. We learned so much about how not to do things. You really don't. I mean, I think anyone who lean is such a big popular topic now, and I think we're not dogmatic about it by any means. We sort of choose and pick the things that make sense for us. But the big takeaway is that I don't think we would have ever really full-heartedly adopted that if we hadn't have had the experience of being ultra wasteful on Hurricane Party first. You've got to experience waste before you can understand how important it is to not be wasteful.
Appreciate lean. Yeah, you were lighting your cigars with $100 bills at South by Southwest, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly.
Money! It doesn't matter. It comes. How many users do you think it's going to take for you guys to really kind of, jump that threshold or move into a kind of a mainstay? Foursquare has been challenged. I believe Foursquare should be at 20 million. I would never have accepted 12 million because it's such a small portion of the global, smartphone population.
Yeah.
So, while people think that that's a great success, 12 million people is an insane amount of people. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm in Canada and our population is 3 times that. It's small. But 12 million in a global scale where there's, 5 billion connected devices or almost 6 billion connected devices, it's like not a success, right? But it is in its field. So how many users do you think it's going to take for you guys to kind of get to that point where you listen, we now carry clout?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I mean, I think there's most people that you talk to, there's sort of these kind of benchmarks. 100,000 user prove
right.
that there's social proofs. That's sort of the next milestone we hope to hit in around November. And then the big milestone after that is 1 million users.
Right.
And that's generally what people use as okay, once you've got 1 million users, you can start to turn revenue on. For lack of experience, that's probably the same milestones that we're going to hit. And I think, God, it's hard to say when does it become a mainstream thing. For me, what will become a mainstream thing, and this sounds ridiculous, use it. Literally, that's my own personal benchmark because
Say it
my
again.
mom is
I lost it. It paused right there. So what is your benchmark?
My personal benchmark is if my mom will use the app. That's
Nice.
when I think I've hit mainstream because my mom is she's not a Luddite. She doesn't have a thing against technology, but she's she's the last adopter of everything. But she is thinking about buying an iPhone. She'll probably buy one in the next 6 months. And she's a social person. She has a lot of friends. She loves having people over for dinner. She loves meeting them out in the world. If she gets the value proposition of my app and uses it, then I'll feel okay, well then that really does hit a mainstream audience. Now will an investor look at that and say that's a good? I don't think I can put that in my investor deck. But
my mom's using it.
Therefore, ergo, your mom will too.
So what about René? What about this question that everybody is going to ask and everybody should be asking, especially your investors or potential investors? What does the revenue model for this look like? How do you make money with Forecast?
We sort of touched on it earlier when I was talking about why I thought this was a big opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all about how we are in this really unique moment to influence future purchase decisions. So that's the short answer, and there's probably not a long answer at this moment. Our roadmap has us right now starting to do experiments with revenue. So we've got maybe 3 or 4 different ideas for potential business models, specific ones. Okay, do we do sort of a Groupon Now style thing, or maybe even do an affiliate program with Groupon to do Groupon Now deals to try to get you to go to one restaurant over another restaurant, or maybe go to a boutique store when you were planning on staying at home. That's sort of one whole business model idea. Another business model idea that I'm really excited about is this idea of making coupons sexy and fun, where you say you're going to go somewhere, and then you should get some pretty sweet coupons for that actual location from the brands themselves. I like that idea a whole lot because selling local sucks. It's incredibly hard. I mean, each local business is getting like 20 calls a day from somebody trying to sell them something. Well, I don't have much experience selling to brands. The thing I like about it is that you make one deal with one brand and you can use it for a much larger segment of your users than if you're to just do a local deal. You can do one local deal. It's only good for the people that happen to live in that town. So I'm doing these very manual experiments right now to try to suss out which of these business models is going to be most effective on our platform. So, for instance, there's a coffee shop around the corner, and every day they do a power hour where you get half-price coffee from 3 to 4. So I said, well, why don't I just go to them and say, hey, can I pretend to be you, Progress Coffee, on our app, and I'm going to just try a bunch of different methods to get people to show up to Power Hour. And I started this like 3 days ago. So I'll just I made an account that looks like Progress Coffee, and I'll write on people's wall. I'll be like, hey, you're going to a coffee shop in our neighborhood. Did you know that we're doing a half-off coffee special from 3 to 4? And trying to engage people in conversations. And right now it's like way too early to say whether or not that anything conclusive, but those are the type of experiments we're running right now. Again, staying lean, keeping it very dumb, simple stuff that I don't have to get anyone to code, and we don't have to have a long argument about is this going to work? Let's analyze it. It's like, well, no, let's just if I can get a couple people to show up, then we know that's fairly effective and maybe worth taking it to the next step of actually coding something. So
how do you measure that? I mean, it's only been 3 days. I understand that, but are you standing there between 3 and 4? How did you hear about us? How did you hear about us?
No, I'm trying to get people to reply back on their comment wall
that I'll be there.
To say like, great, I'll be there.
Yeah.
And so far I've only gotten a couple people to be like, thanks, sounds neat. I'm not going to come, but thanks.
Creepy coffee stalker guy.
Yeah, creepy coffee. I'm learning all sorts of things about are people annoyed by that? Do they, right. Are they creeped out by it? And again, it's very inconclusive right now. But I will say that it's I was sort of my co-founder Eric was like, dude, people are going to hate that, and no one has hated it. People have been pretty comfortable with it, I think. At least they haven't said anything that this is weird. But
I mean, I guess you could take the data from Foursquare. How many times somebody has checked into a Starbucks or a local Starbucks around where this coffee shop is, and you can crunch some numbers and say, okay, this makes sense, because if we can draw over a percentage of those guys that they do go for coffee anyways between 3 and 4 or whatever it is. I mean, this is where analytics plays a key role, and but oftentimes you're right. You can get bogged down into the numbers, and why don't we just try it?
Yeah, that's sort of. I mean, the analytics are good for sort of that first blush, and then it's incrementally more sophisticated ways of trying different implementations. Like we already drank the Kool-Aid in terms of yes, this is an opportunity. It's going to work one way or another.
Yep.
And right now we're just experimenting with these very lo-fi means of sussing it. Like the next one I'm going to do later today is I'm going to offer fake coupon discounts for places. So when someone's forecasted somewhere, I'll say, hey, did you know we're running a coupon for half off? I mean, if they're going to a grocery store, half off a 6-pack of Pepsi. If you want this coupon, reply back to me. And then if I get a reply back, I'm physically going to go to that store and offer to buy them a half of a Pepsi, because that's ultimately that's a bit of my time, but it's my time to do that is a lot less, and we get a whole lot more validation than if we spent 2 weeks building something to sort of make it look more official or whatever.
I just imagine that person. Yeah, I'm interested. I'll go to that grocery store, and then it's René standing at the front going, psst, hey, Bill, here's your coupon, right? I love that. I love that vision. I love that. I mean, what about these grassroots opportunities like this start to show that it's gonna work. When you went to the coffee shop, how did you sell it to them? How do you foresee yourself selling this to either a local store or a big chain? Have you thought about that?
Yeah. So I mean, I think the really exciting thing is we can use where our users are already forecasting as sort of like a lead gen. We know, for instance, at Progress Coffee, and it happens to be a biased location because it's around the corner from our office, that has a lot of forecasts. So I went up to the manager and I was like, hey, we're in the building around the corner, and we're making this app called Forecast, and in the last week, 25 people have forecasted they're going here. We think that we can maybe run some ads and some experiments that might be able to boost that number and pull people away from some of your competitors. Are you comfortable with me running this experiment? So it's very easy when you're not asking for money. But even so, like I went there and I showed them how the app worked, and I made an example post, because I wanted to make sure they were comfortable with me saying I was Progress Coffee. I was like, "Hi, I'm René from Progress Coffee. I don't work there." But so that pitch went really easy. I mean, it's going to be much harder when you're trying to ask for money from people. That's always the real litmus test. But that will be the next test. That is the next test. Like once we've sort of hacked together some more solidified thing that actually is not me showing up and offering a coupon to somebody, then that's the real thing where you start to do the customer development, where you're like, okay, here's this basic thing, even if it's somewhat vaporware, will you pay me for it? And then that's the real validation for knowing that you've got a business model that'll work.
It's interesting because even if I forecast that I'm going to be at Progress Coffee, that should say something. That when somebody buys into this, like Progress Coffee, it would be great. That's a sign. It says, listen, I'm going to be there in 2 hours. Do you foresee Progress Coffee or any of these companies just saying, okay, well, because you're there in 2 hours, we'll kick something in. We'll either coupon you or, we'll welcome you at the door. We'll put a screen up that says, hey, welcome René to Progress Coffee. Do you see that kind of stuff happening as well? Because that's really, if I'm broadcasting where I am, I mean, well, by all means, when I arrive, sound the trumpets. Now entering the room is Rob, right? Because ultimately, that's customer service. And, so many times with Groupon and all these ridiculous couponing companies, people are opportunistic. They're in, they're out. They never go back a second time, right? And what's the point of doing that? So do you think about, customer loyalty in this as well? Yeah,
I mean, the part that I'm really excited, and it has yet to be validated, but the idea that these deals, we've talked about a ton of different ways that they could work, but that it's not just a thing that will flash up and you get your coupon. I think that's part of it, but I think it's more interesting when they can actually engage in a dialogue with you. And maybe, in the same way that businesses are getting pretty savvy about listening to Twitter and Facebook and engaging with customers in a conversation there, that you can start the sales process, hours, days before they actually arrive. Like, let's say we were to do a partnership with a car dealership, which we're actually talking to somebody who reached out to us, one of the major, more high-end sports cars dealership. They read about us on a blog or something and called us up, and we're thinking of doing something with them. But the idea there would be, like I forecast I'm going to a dealership. They can start to have a dialogue with you about the different cars, what your needs are, all that stuff, hours and days before. So when you arrive, it's like, here's the model that we had talked about. It's all ready to go. We can do a test drive right away. And you build that personal relationship with that customer. And if it's like a restaurant or something like that, maybe they've got your favorite table already set. They know you like drinking, a Guinness. It's already on the table. Those kind of like personalization. And that gets back to the idea of that real world clout. It's like, do I want to like spend massive amounts of time talking to all of my customers? Maybe not, but you could easily set up some thresholds where you're like, okay, I'm a company and I'm going to spend the time engaging with this customer because I know that they, if they buy my product, it's going to get me way more bang for my buck than if some other person buys it.
I can see that. I don't know that I'd want a sales guy reaching out to me 2, 3, 4 days before I'm going in to buy a car. Oftentimes, I like that to be the briefest point of my interaction with them. But I get your point, right?
And that might not work at all. It might be we'll do more of these lean experiments and figure out if people are totally creeped out by that or not.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, René from from a coffee shop, that's okay. But hey, Bill from the from the car dealership, or the worst are the real estate agents that have their picture on their cards. I can imagine like, hey. So in all of this, it requires a lot of marketing, right? I've heard oftentimes, and I believe this very firmly, that once you've got your idea and your technology is implemented, technology is kind of 10% of the puzzle. 90% is awareness making, marketing, market creation, user creation, and then finding a business place for it. So a lot of what you've done is word of mouth, obviously, right? I mean, I found out. I'll tell you how I found out about you. Schneider Mike, who's a social media and a location guy. He wrote a book called Location-Based Marketing for Dummies. Talked about it to a guy named Asif Khan, who is the founder and the CEO of the Location-Based Marketing Association, who I do a podcast with weekly called This Week in Location-Based Marketing. And we featured you as, he brought it to my attention, we featured you as a product of the, as a resource of the week. And that's how I came to you, right? So word of mouth. Is that how is that what it's finding?
Yeah, I mean, so until a week ago, we were in private beta, which meant that the only way that you could get into the to use the app was if you already had a friend on it.
Okay.
And we spent $0 on marketing or PR so far on Foreca. So it's all been friends inviting friends.
Okay.
I have the only experience I have with any kind of marketing or anything like that is all of the stuff that we tried to do with Hurricane Party, and we did a lot of different innovative stuff. And what I learned is that it's incredibly hard. It's so hard. And it generally is going to cost a lot of time and a lot of money and not get you a whole lot of users.
Yep.
So that being said, you have to, you can't just always rely on virality, unless you can, in which case that's awesome. But we're certainly not going to rely just on virality. The things that I'm most excited about, I think where we'll get the most mileage is once we figure out which of these business models we're going to go after. Look for ways that we can use those partners for distribution. Yelp is a great example. They got everyone to put that damn sticker on the door, and then people go, what's Yelp? And they go to the website or download the app. Sort of takes care of distribution in a nice way. And you can imagine that a lot of the types of business models we talked about could have some sort of analogous way of handling distribution. So those, because largely those are free partnerships. You're not like paying anything. You're going to get a lot more bang for your buck. But I don't know. Again, like I'm a total newbie when it comes to marketing. I am starting discussions with people that are smart. If you know anyone that I should talk to that is an expert in marketing mobile apps, I would love to talk to them because we are going to start spending money on this stuff pretty soon again because we feel like we've gotten that product market fit and validated enough that we're like, okay, let's actually start spending money on trying to get more users in. But long-winded way of saying I don't know.
I don't have a clue. Well, I'm going to give you a great example of a company that I've interviewed on Untether, one of my very first interviews, but I stay in touch with them. It's a company called Cellwand, and they do a national service in Canada and the U.S. called Pound Taxi. And what they have done, the reason they did this 2 years ago, and it stuck with me. It's an incredible co-marketing agreement, and anybody who's watching or listening, or even you guys, because what you said really tweaked, is that they worked with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, so MAD. Pound Taxi for MAD, social responsibility. They realized that every one of the liquor companies, like Captain Morgan's and all, and Jose Cuerva, and they all have to allocate a certain amount of their marketing dollars to social responsible marketing. So instead of going out and trying to push it themselves, and they went the carrier route, they got onboarded on all the phones. It took them 7 years to do that. As soon as they went with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, changed their tune to social responsible marketing, all of a sudden, they were everywhere because everybody had $1 million or $2 million to spend on social responsible marketing, and they didn't know what to do with it. So in comes Pound Taxi. If you go to any MAD ad, print, paper, on television ads, you'll see Pound Taxi. Right, and
I saw it for the first time in a restroom literally yesterday.
Yeah,
yeah. It costs $1.50 or something like that to use it too. So they're making money every which way.
But it's pretty. I mean, that is that kind of innovation, right? Like you find your spot and you just say, okay, that's how we're going to market because they don't have a lot of money. They raised a couple of $1 million 3 years ago, right? So they have to think creatively around how they leverage partners to market, and that's what it sounds like you're looking for as well. That kind of stuff.
It's all about how you can use someone else's user base as for distribution, or some other company that already has some of that solution for distribution. Like, because just paying for it with ads is not going to add up.
No. So, I mean, when you open, that's just a side story, but it sounds like, I mean, this is what I hear quite often, and Pound Taxi is the one company I've seen do an exceptional job with it for distribution. That company is an Ottawa company up here in Canada, and you're in Austin, and you're seeing their ads in toilets. They're right over the urinals right now.
Yeah, yep.
So, when you went from the private beta into, you opened it up to everybody else, I mean, those numbers, did you see a mass accelerant in numbers? Like, were there 1,000 people in private beta and then you went up, or has it been pretty consistently good growth for you guys since then?
Well, no, I mean, I have no idea like if this would be interesting to the audience, but our growth is.
I don't care anymore. This is my questions, right? No, the audience is very.
I think it's interesting. If you think it's interesting, then that's enough for me.
No, Renee, you know what I found very clearly is that people who watch this and listen to this are very keen on metrics, numbers, because it's inspiring to them. It's inspiring to me to understand. Listen, the efforts that everybody's putting into developing these products. There's a light, so there's opportunity here. So nobody's bored about metrics.
Okay, well here goes our analysis of our metrics. So we're built just on top of Foursquare. You need a Foursquare login to get in right now, which means that the peculiarities of their social graph are, that's everything for us. So on average, over all of the 12 million users that Foursquare has, on average, a user on their platform has only 7, 8 friends, so a very low number of friends. Now, that's way different when you look at the power users, right? Yeah. Power users have, on average, maybe around 200 friends. Yeah. So what we've seen is when we released our iPhone app in July, we saw this nice, steady, up and to the right, hockey stick like growth that peaked at about 1,200 new users a day for us. That was sort of like our peak. And when we're doing the analysis of what caused that, we noticed that the most determining factor was the average number of users that came into our system. So on average, a new user to our system will invite about a quarter of their friends. About a fourth of their friends they'll invite to the platform, right? So when we're going through a nice super user pocket, that means that if a new user has on average 200 friends, they're going to invite 50 friends, right? And then of those 50 friends they invite, a certain, fairly constant percentage, in our case it's about 3%, will actually convert to be users, right? So if you're inviting 50 friends per user, and on average 3% sign up, you're above 1 new user, and therefore your viral coefficient is above 1, and therefore you're looking at exponential viral growth. Yeah. But once you start to eat your way through those super users, the per average friend count drops, and it steadily dropped from about 200 down to 100, and then it's been sort of around between like 20 and 50 or 60 after that. We released the Android app. We see that exact same trend continue, right? We eat our way through all those power users that are have Androids, and now we're on that other side of that curve, right? So even though this answers your private beta thing. So even though we came out of private beta, we're actually on the other side of that Android curve. So the next thing that we need to do is, because that's a trend that's going to continue now all the way down to 7, right? 7 users or friends that a Foursquare user has on average. So the next big thing that we're doing is reworking our invite system so that you can invite friends that are your Facebook friends, that you can invite people from your address book, all that standard stuff that most apps do that we just haven't done yet.
Right.
That'll be the next thing that gets our viral coefficient nice and above 1 again. Because the one thing that's constant is that users do and always have since the very beginning have always on average invited about a fourth of their friends. And I don't know if that's like something that other app makers have seen as well, or if it's just particular to our app. But
it's pretty amazing because I mean, when I signed up for it, it says like here are your Foursquare friends. Are you interested in do you want to send them? And you make it very easy. And obviously, what you're telling me is that's a very effective approach. And other app makers should be thinking about this. That if you're not doing it already, you should be doing this, which is inviting your friends to these apps.
And Foursquare, and for any app maker out there, Foursquare is a really, if you're doing a location-based app, it's a great API to start with because when a user authenticates, they give us access to all of their friends' email addresses. Yeah. Now, we don't spam any of those friends, but if you hit invite, we can actually send an email on your behalf, which is totally different than how Facebook does it and a lot of other social platforms do it, where you don't have a direct way of sending an email to a friend. So it's pretty relatively powerful. It's really powerful to have access to a new user's friends to send an email on their behalf. So I highly recommend it for anyone that's trying to get a toehold with a new app.
Well, I was worried there because I pulled up my Foursquare and it's like, okay, I got 207 friends. So I was like, can I be talking to anybody if I'm not a power user? So your threshold of 200, at least I qualify for that.
You are over it, my friend.
Yeah. Okay, so what haven't I asked you about what you're doing with Forecast that I should have asked you? Is there anything that I've left out there that we haven't talked about?
I think the only thing is that we're planning on coming, if anyone's listening to this and excited about Forecast or maybe knows about Forecast, things that we're working on. Recently, the most requested feature was let me search for venues that are far away. When we first released the app, you could only search for venues that are within like 15 miles. So the most recent version of the iPhone has that. We're working on fixing that in the Android now. So in about a week, we'll have that out.
I did notice that because I'm going to be in California at the at a GigaOM conference, and I could see now the venue, but I can't check in because it's 2 days away.
That's the second most requested feature is the 24-hour window. So we had this thesis that people on Facebook and Plancast, they'd RSVP to a ton of stuff, and then they'd never show up. They'd flake out. The flake out factor was really high, and we had this thesis that part of that reason is because the event is in the distant future. And, it's fun, it sounds good. Well, I'll go ahead and RSVP, and then when the day comes around, I'll actually decide whether or not to go. So we said, well, let's just limit it to 24 hours because, you're like pretty much at the window of time where you're making that decision then. So our flakeout factor would be a lot less. So our flakeout factor is a lot less. We, on average, our users make about, 2,300 forecasts a day, and their check-ins are, just a little bit under that. So, most of our users are, making forecasts and then matriculating into a check-in. So
like 90%, do you think, are actually following through or so?
So our ratio between forecast to check-in is at about 75%, which for me means that our actual flake-out factor is a little better than that because some people still forget to check in, but they do actually go. So I'd say it's probably around 80–85%. But that's just the thesis, right? So the next thing that we're going to test is we're going to extend the time horizon to have no barrier, and then we'll see where do most people make those forecasts and how does that affect their flake-out factor, and then go back and put it'll probably be somewhere between 48 hours and maybe 7 days. That's my gut where it'll end up being. But anyways, that's the next big feature, and then we come out of beta in October once we've got those things ironed out, and then we'll announce to the world, hey, we're sort of ready for everyone to know about us.
All right. Well, then, I'm out of questions. You're probably out of answer. We've been doing this for a long time, and I really appreciate the fact that you've spent so much time with us, René. So you're going to come out of this in the fall. How do people find out about you now? Where do they go?
So Forecast.com is a $9 million address. So we got one of those crazy country codes. So we're Foreca.st.
Foreca.st.
So it's forecast spelled just normal, Forecast, but you move that decimal point over 2 points. So it's between the A and the S, there's a point.
So Foreca.st, and you can download the app, obviously, iPhone and iOS and Android as well.
Yeah, both. We're the #1 ranking when you type in Forecast in the App Store. We're number 15 in the Android. So be patient if you have an Android and scroll down until you see the little blue paper airplane.
That's because everybody in Android is still building weather-related applications to date, right?
Yeah,
it's a little bit new.
It was really hard to beat out the Weather Channel for the #1 ranking for Forecast. We thought we'd never get there, but we did.
Well, it's a whole other challenge, and what I'd love to do is as you're going through this process, as you're launching and post-launch, and you get this out to the rest of the world, you start spending money on marketing, doing those things that you've got to do to kind of push this out, start signing clients. I want to have you, René, back on here to talk about your experiences, because what I found is that you've been very open. Hope that never changes, because it helps the industry to get these kind of numbers out there. So if you're game, I'd love to come back and see after your launch and see how things are going. You up for that?
I'm up for that, Rob. I really enjoyed this call. It's fun.
Well, and no pressure. It's just the camera's on. This will be broadcast to thousands of people, and that's why I like doing it on camera, because I can say, hey, remember you said... listen, I've been speaking with René Pinnell, who is you're the co-founder, obviously, of Forecast, and you've been live in Austin and very, very, very liberal and with your time. So I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much, René, for doing this.
Thank you, Rob. Talk to you later.
And everybody who's watching and listening, man, I appreciate the fact that you do this every episode that you can. And I know you found a ton of value in this, and I'd love to hear some feedback at untether@gmail.com. Reach out. Let me know what you think. And let me know if who should be on the show next. I really appreciate it. But until next time, this has been another episode of Untether.tv. Later. See you, René.
Bye.